So to make enough room for solution 1, in our first module, I'm going to move temporarily a virtual machine out of the way. So within my temp folder on my virtual machines, I have a virtual machine that's taking up 44 gigabytes, and I'm going to drop it onto this. Once again, I've connected an external hard drive or USB to a super speed USB port or USB 3.0 port so that I get good transfer rates. And I'm just going to drop this, and in about 3 minutes I'll have a copy of that large file. I can do the same with videos, I can do the same with pictures. I'm just making room to make sure I have enough disk space for the virtual machine construction. Once the file transfer is complete, I'm going to delete the local folder here, and that will free up 44 gigabytes of space. You need to have 44 gigabytes of free disk space. So when you click on this PC and you look at your C drive, the amount of available free space for your solution must read greater than 40 gigabytes of space. Ideally, you want 44 gigs. If you're a little short, you could do 36 or 32 gigabytes, but you can't really go any lower than that if you're going to install Windows Standard Edition 2019 for your Module 1 solution. So I'm going to pause the recording while the transfer is finishing. Are there any questions about a quick and simple way to make more disk space for your assignment? So in my downloads folder, I have a copy of the Windows Server 2019 installation file or ISO file that I downloaded from a previous assignment, and I'm going to validate that I have a good copy of that file by checking the size, the sum of the bytes in the file. That's called a checksum. I'm doing it visually and manually. I have 292,310,528 bytes. The size for your ISO should match exactly, all the way down to the numbers 310528. If they don't, you need to download the install media from the Microsoft software option in the My Campus portal once again. So we are going to set up our standard server 2019 on your local laptop. You'll need at least 44 gigabytes of space. And as we said before, if you need to, you can delete or transfer files to give yourself enough breathing room to create the 40 gigabytes of space minimum to install your virtual machine on your local laptop. You see here I now have 49.9 gigabytes, and because I optimized my personal technology, I'm not worried about other disk space being needed for a swap file or swap memory, because I've set up a custom swap file minimum and maximum size. So I can use all of that 44 gigs and have just a few gigs to spare, and I'm still okay. I'm going to go ahead and remove my external drive just to make sure that doesn't get in the mix. So I'll go ahead and remove my USB thumb drive, and now I'll start the installation process for my solution. So at this point, you should have completed all the steps required to optimize your technology. And what we're going to do is select Oracle VirtualBox and right-click it with our mouse and run as administrator. It's going to ask, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? You're going to say yes, and then the option should open. It's saying that a new version of VirtualBox has been released. 6.1.14 is available at virtualbox.org. It's very important to keep and use the latest version, so if you run into this, before you start your installation, you need to say OK, and then go to this website and download the latest version. I'm going to say OK, and I'd like to look and see what version of VirtualBox I'm running. This says 6.1.12. So that's not the latest one. 6.1.14 is the latest version. I'm going to close this. I'll navigate to virtualbox.org. And the first screen that I'm greeted with will say download VirtualBox 1.14. I want the one for Windows hosts. If I have a Mac, I'm going to use the OS X hosts. And I'm also going to download this option for all supported platforms, the VirtualBox extension packs. So I'll go ahead and click on this, begin my download. And then also click here to begin the download on this. It's a much smaller file. It should load very quickly. 10 megs and 103 megs respectively. I'll go ahead and pause the recording. I'm going to resume my installation process by updating the new version of VirtualBox. I'm going to select it in my Downloads folder and right-click it and run as administrator. Once again, it'll greet me with a little pop-up that you can't see on the screen right now, but it'll say, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? I'm going to answer yes, and it's going to install the newest version of VirtualBox 6.1.14. By the time you watch this video, it might be 6.1.20 or even 7. Who knows. So I'm going to select the default options. It'll say that network interfaces will be disrupted while I'm loading this. You might see the screen flicker, but stand by. I'll click install, and this will load. At some point, if the screen disrupts, we can simply jump back into the Zoom session. Usually it installs very quickly, especially if you have a previous installation. It's going to remove the previous registry entries and all sorts of other things, and then write new ones. We're going to need this extension pack because it's what allows, so it's going to ask if we can start VirtualBox. I'm going to go ahead and finish that. It should open VirtualBox, and at this point I'm going to right-click and open the extension pack. It's asking now if I want to install the extension pack, and I'll go ahead and say install. I need to scroll down the screen to see the license agreement, review it. I'll agree with it so it completes the installation. And I should be greeted with a pop-up that says the extension pack was installed successfully. Any questions at this point with the update of VirtualBox Manager before we begin our virtual system setup? Okay, so I'm going to create a new machine. And to create a new machine, I'm going to use the new option here. And you'll notice that my default machine folder is set to temp VM. Your default machine folder should also be similar. It should not point to your documents folder, especially if you use OneDrive. This is something we discussed in a previous review. So I'm going to call this solution 1, or I could call this server underscore 2019. Whoops. 2019, and I'll say underscore standard, STD, standard. Server underscore 2019 standard. I'm going to take the type and select Microsoft Windows, and then scroll down, and I'll find a Windows 2019 64-bit option. I need to make this change because when I type in server, it starts to think, oh, I'm dealing with Solaris. I'm going to click next. If I have 8 gigs of RAM or more, I'm going to give at least 4 gigs of RAM in megabytes, stated in megabytes. So if I do the math, that's 4096 megabytes. If I leave the default setting, it'll be a slow installation. We want this to go quickly. In fact, I'm going to take it even a step further. Just for installation purposes, I'm going to put in 6144 for the amount of megabytes because I actually have a little more than 8 gigs. I have 12 gigs on my laptop. If you have 16 or more, you can put 8192. I'm gonna use 6 just so it moves along quickly. I'm gonna create a virtual hard disk. It's the input output that allows me to load the operating system, and I'll click create. I will accept the VDI image format, and I want to create a fixed size, not a dynamically allocated size. That's going to create all the space that I need and take up 40 gigs on my physical hard disk. I'm going to change from 50 to 40, just as a minimum. And once again, if you're really cramped for disk space and you move some things around, or move some things temporarily off your laptop, you could get away with 36. I don't want this thing to be too cramped for demonstration purposes for the class, so I'm going to say 40. And well, actually, I went to a lot of trouble to make that extra space. I'll say 44. I'm going to create, and if I have a solid state hard drive on my laptop, this should move pretty quickly. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording just to let this play out. Are there any questions while we're waiting? So now that my server 2019 standard virtual machine is built, there are 3 portions on the screen inside the Virtualbox Manager application. This is our VM inventory list, and you'll see here I have several virtual machines on this system. I've got a Linux machine that I use for software scientific computing applications, CSE 213, and I've also built some other Linux test machines. When I click on each of these, you'll notice the configuration summary changes for each of these. So this is the VM inventory portion of the GUI, and in our upcoming assessment, you're expected to know that this is the VM inventory list, right? This is the part of the screen where you can check out the different virtual machines, and then as you click on each of them, the configuration summary shows here, and this allows you to click into and just check on settings so you can work with the configuration of the different systems. You can also click on settings once a system is selected. This is the other machine that I pulled off of the drive, and it's going to show that there's a problem, but as soon as I restore that back after our demo, that'll turn green again. So I've selected the last virtual machine, the one we're building, and I want to change some settings before I go in to ensure that when I start the build, it'll work properly. Just as I did for the RAM and increased the amount of RAM that I'm using so it's faster, I want to click on the processor tab and increase the number of CPUs to at least 2 so that I can make the installation process quick and painless. On the motherboard tab, I'm going to uncheck or disable floppy because I don't have a floppy disk. And I do want the optical disk to be the first to be in the boot order because I want the installation media to load from that. So I'm going to come over to the storage option, and you'll notice that my DVD CD disk tray is empty. And if I click on this, the screen option here changes, and I can go ahead and click on my image and then choose a disk file. I'm going to go into the downloads folder and select my install media. This is not a live CD or hot pluggable, so I'm going to leave those options unselected. In my network option, I'm going to change network address translation, or NAT, to bridged adapter. And in the display settings, I'm going to make sure that the maximum amount of memory is set for video memory so that I have the best resolution. And I'm going to check the box for acceleration. If my laptop has a dedicated graphics card, and in this case it has an Intel integrated graphics controller, I'm going to select this box, which means that I'm going to have better options. I'm also going to include a shared folder. And in this case, I want to click the plus sign for the shared folder and then hit the pull down for folder path, select other, and I simply want to include downloads or temp as a share folder because it's convenient. So if I have my temp folder on my C drive and I make that share read-only and I mount it automatically, when I start my virtual machine, anything that's in the temp folder will appear as a drive letter in the virtual machine, and I can drag things across between machines. I'll click OK. Another fun option in the general tab here is to click Advanced and then to allow copy and paste between the virtual machine and the host machine. I'll enable that in both directions, and drag and drop. So if I have a window with the virtual machine running, I can drag things out of there onto my host desktop and vice versa. It's generally considered best to leave that alone for security purposes, but because this is a test environment and I'm doing it for educational purposes and not for a business or production environment, to demonstrate things, I'm going to turn that on. So you'll see here I have bidirectional for both shared clipboard and drag and drop. Clipboard is what happens. The clipboard is a reserved memory location when you copy and paste things in between applications. That item is stored in memory in a space called the clipboard. So if I make that bidirectional, I can copy something on the clipboard inside the virtual machine and then go into my host machine on the desktop and paste it, or just drag and drop it. Any questions about selecting and configuring final options for the hardware before we start our installation?
No question.
Okay. Yes. Was that a question?
I said no questions.
Okay. Was there anyone else?
No.
Okay. So now I'm going to start the machine. As soon as I start the machine, instantly the preview window should change. So this is the other part of the GUI that you're expected to know. And it's asking which startup disk do I want. I don't want the Virtualbox additions. That has to do with the extensions. We're going to run that once the server is built. But for now, we're going to hit the pull down option and we're going to select Windows Server 2019. We'll hit start, and it's starting the virtual machine. I'm going to turn off this notification up here. It's just telling me about capturing the keyboard every time I click into this window. And you'll notice that as this screen is changing, the preview window up here starts changing. So I'm not just seeing a label for what kind of title the virtual machine has anymore. I'm actually seeing a preview of what's running inside the machine. If you have more than one virtual machine running, this part of the VirtualBox Manager window is actually pretty helpful, because then you can click on the different machines and see what's going on as they're running. You can have more than one running. How do I get my virtual machine window back? Well, it's usually down here, and it's a separate item on my taskbar now, or I can double click on my preview and open it from there. So that's helpful now. I'm going to close my notifications by clicking on the blue X, and I'm going to select the default to get the server installation started. I'm going to install. Once the server operating system is installed, I'll have an option to insert the additions CD from the VirtualBox extensions through the device. And you'll notice here it says it wants an activation key. I have that on a text file I'm going to put in my temp folder, so I can just copy and paste it in later. For now, I'm going to answer I don't have a product key. And I'm going to select the standard desktop experience. I will not select the data center because I'm going to use the key for the standard. And I want the desktop experience because I want the GUI, I want the graphical user interface, I want the windows on my screen. If I select 2019 standard, all I get is a command prompt. I have to know all of the commands and PowerShell scripting to operate the server, and that's kind of painful. So we're going to select standard desktop experience, click next, accept the terms of the license, hit next, select custom, and I should see my total disk space for the virtual hard disk here. If I see something other than the size of the virtual hard disk I created, something is wrong, and Windows could be installing on your host system. So that's why you want to see this screen. You want to make sure that it shows 44 gigs, or in your case, if you're using a smaller disk and you created a 36 gig drive, you want to see 36 gigs. I'm going to hit next, and the installation will kick off, the screen will change, and I'll see a series of checkboxes as it's running down through the installation. It actually installs fairly quickly, and at some point it's going to want to reboot the system. We'll want to go into machine settings and remove the disk from the tray so it doesn't boot from the disk all the time. Are there any questions before we pause the recording here just to let this run its course?
No question.
No question.
Okay. So here you see we finished the installation. Windows is going to need to restart. We'll go ahead and restart. At first, when it restarts, the screen is going to prompt you to press any key if you leave the installation media in the CD tray. But it may reboot to finish the installation process before it's complete, and that's what you're seeing now. So it hasn't asked me to press a key to start setup like it did the first time because it needed to reboot to finish our first installation. We can expect it's going to ask us for login credentials soon, and this is an important step that we want to document. You want to have a separate file on your host machine or piece of paper somewhere, or you write down the administrator password that you use to finish the installation. If you forget your user, all right, so now it's asking to press any key, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to start Windows setup all over again. I basically am going to leave that alone. And from within my machine settings, I'm now going to storage. I'm going to select my disk tray, and I'm going to remove the disk from virtual drive. Click OK. Now I won't have to worry about that again. Once again, you want to record. You want to make sure that you have an easy way to remember this. You want it to be a strong password. The administrator login is something that hackers like to try to crack. So you don't want to use something that's too easy or too obvious about yourself or anyone in your family or your friends that anyone can look up, or your favorite pets. I'm going to put in something fairly complex with upper and lower case. And I'm going to use some special characters so that it's not easy for someone to guess. And then I'm going to click Finish. Yep, yeah, and if it doesn't match, it'll tell me it doesn't match. Upper and lower case, special symbols, numbers, and characters. The first screen you're going to see is the welcome screen with Control-Alt-Delete to unlock. And to get into your virtual system to complete your setup, you're going to want to use the input menu, select keyboard, and then insert Control-Alt-Delete. This is one way that you can insert keystrokes into a virtual system even though you don't have a physical keyboard attached. And there is a soft keyboard option that allows you to click with a mouse, so a keyboard will appear on the screen. But we're just going to go ahead and insert Control-Alt-Delete. It'll give us our administrator login, the one we just set up. And this is where you're going to find out if you remembered your password correctly. You should be on the internet, but you'll find that browsing right away is not very intuitive. You do want to check to make sure that you can browse. The first screen that always opens up when you connect will be Server Manager, but you'll also see this window. You want to answer no. You always answer no. Do you want to allow your PC to be discoverable by other PCs and devices on this network? Well, you're connected to the internet, so you want to answer no. any questions about the first response inside your system, you can close this and you can select this box that says don't show this message again. It's going to tell you that you can use the Windows Admin Center to manage several servers. Yeah, that's great. And if you click, you can basically use your server manager dashboard to add roles like web server, email server, database, DNS, all sorts of interesting roles you can configure for this virtual system. I'm going to click on the local server option, and one of the first things I'm going to do is change my IE enhanced security configuration from on to off for administrators. The reason I'm going to do this is because if I go here to the Internet Explorer and click OK, and then go somewhere like Google just to make sure that it's working. I'm going to get all sorts of pop-ups that ask me about security settings, and that's going to be a nuisance. And all I want to do is verify connectivity. I'm going to say no thanks, and I'm going to close this for now. I'm also going to change the time zone. It's important to change the time zone for your server because the reference time zone for Microsoft is Seattle, Washington. That's Pacific time. We don't want to change the date and time. So we're not changing the time manually to match our local time. We're changing the time zone. And we're going to hit the pull down here to select San Juan, the entry with San Juan, because we're neighbors with Puerto Rico and we're in the same time zone. We're going to click OK. The other thing that I want you to notice is the name. I want you to give your server a decent name, and I want you to change the default workgroup name to something like Fast and Furious, or pick something that you would like, that you would like to use as a theme for what you're doing. You'll notice that the IPv4 address that's assigned is assigned by the wireless access controller in your house. That's okay. But you want to change the computer name and workgroup, and then you're going to activate your license key. So let's do a couple of these things real quick, and then you'll be able to take a single screenshot of the finished result here, and that's what you'll submit for your Solution 1 upload. So I'm going to let's work on one thing at a time. I want to activate my license key now that I know my network is working. And it's going to give me a window where I can enter the product key. Well, you'll recall that I put a file inside my shared folder. I don't see that shared folder on my system, which means my extensions aren't loaded. So I'm going to minimize this for now by clicking on this small icon in the lower right corner. Down here to the right of the notifications, there's a slender, tall button. I'm going to click on that, and that's going to give me my desktop back. I'm going to go to Devices and insert the Guest Editions CD. This pop-up will appear, and I'm going to select this and say Open in File Explorer. Once open in File Explorer, I'm going to select the AMD64 option, right-click, and Run as Administrators. So this is going to load the guest editions. That's going to allow the drag and drop and copy and paste in shared folders and such. I'm going to click Next and Install, and this provides a bridge of connectivity between my virtual system and my host system. I'm going to Always Trust from Oracle, and install. And at some point, I should see a screen that says installation was successful. Screen will flash, which means the video drivers, the enhanced USB, all that's going to work better. In order for me to do my license key quickly and efficiently, I'm going to say reboot now. So I'll finish, and this will restart my system. But because the installation is finished, a reboot for the virtual machine should play out pretty quickly. I'm going to close these notifications that are coming up. And in any moment, I'll see an administrator login. So this is where, if other steps for maintaining your personal technology have not been done, it'll cost you dearly in terms of delay time. I'm going to input my Control-Alt-Delete again to log in. Put in my password, my complex password that's not easy to guess. And at this point, I should see my shared directory. So I'm going to click on my File Explorer and click on this PC, and here you see a new disk that's showing. I don't need the Virtualbox guest extensions or additions anymore, so I can right-click this, select it, and then eject it, because that's already been done. I've already loaded those things. But I want to double-click into here, and I want to drag a copy of the license keys onto my desktop, because I want that to be handy when I set up my license key. So I'll just minimize this for now, and I'll maximize, well, no, I'll click on local server, and I'll stretch out the corner so I can see a little better. And there's my product ID. Just off the screen, it says not activated. If I were to maximize that, I'm going to click on that link, not activated. That'll give me the enter a product key option. I'm going to open my two keys, and since I installed my standard edition, I'm going to use the standard key. I'm going to edit and copy. I'll come into the enter a product key option and paste and hit next. And it says by activating, you get the best experience. Yeah, stuff works. A lot of things don't work if you don't activate your server. If you're connected to the network and you've already tested for network access with a bridged network adapter, a copy of Windows should be activated. So that's one of the things we need to see in your finished screen, so that your Windows is activated. I can close my license key file now. I have my time set. I'm going to go to my computer name and change it. So I'm going to put in a computer name, and I'm also going to change the work group. In this case, I'm going to use something popular, like I'm going to call this Frodo from Lord of the Rings. And I'm going to use an acronym. I'm going to abbreviate Lord of the Rings for LOR. I don't want to use the workgroup default, which is called Workgroup, in place, because when my virtual system is operating, I don't want a hacker to be able to just search for a workgroup and then find some weird computer name and go, oh, let's see who's there. They have to know the name of the workgroup and they have to know computer names in order to navigate. And so I'm going to make it harder for hackers by changing the computer name and changing the default work group. I click OK. And in just a moment, it's going to say that I'm welcome to the Lord of the Rings work group. I'm going to say OK, and it's going to say, hey, you have to restart your computer to apply these changes. I'm going to say OK here and close. And once I click Restart Now and log in again, you'll see these values changed, which means that when I click Local Server next time, it'll have an activated product key, the right time zone, something other than Workgroup, and something other than this funky name. It'll be a name of my choosing. The IE enhanced security configurations will be off because I had to do that to test things. Those criteria have to be showing on your screen. You'll capture a screenshot of your server after the restart with those shown on screen. And that's all you have to do to finish your solution for Module 1. Are there any questions before we stop the recording?
No question.
Nope.